Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. You don't belong here, not in my world. The words sliced through the laughter and champagne like glass. Seconds later, Ethan Cole, the wealthy groom-to-be, reached for the delicate strap of his ex-girlfriend's dress and ripped it apart. Right there, in front of 200 stunned guests. The crowd froze for a heartbeat, then burst into cruel laughter. Under the golden glow of the ballroom chandeliers, Lena Hart stood motionless, her thrifted cream dress torn open, her dignity stripped bare. Cameras flashed. Champagne spilled. Her sister, the bride, smiled like it was part of the show. But as humiliation tightened around her like a noose, a tall stranger stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. He removed his jacket, placed it gently over Lena's trembling shoulders, and said calmly, "That's enough." In that instant, the laughter died. What no one knew was that this man, and this moment, would unravel every secret that had built Ethan's empire. And that was the night Lena's life began again. The crystal chandelier shimmered above the grand ballroom, reflecting hundreds of faces, smiling, applauding, pretending. At the center of it, all stood Evelyn Hart, her hand trembling slightly as she held the champagne flute. The engagement ring on her finger sparkled under the golden light, but her eyes were distant. "Smile, sweetheart," whispered Daniel Pierce, her fiancé, tightening his arm around her waist. His grip was firm, too firm. "Everyone's watching." Evelyn forced a polite laugh as photographers surrounded them. "Of course," she murmured, hiding the strain in her voice. To everyone else, they were the picture of perfection, the billionaire heir and the woman who captured his heart. But behind that flawless image was a truth Evelyn could barely breathe beneath. As the crowd cheered, Daniel raised his glass. "To the woman who made me believe in love again," he announced. The room erupted in applause. Evelyn smiled through it all, feeling her pulse throb against the diamond on her finger. Then, from across the room, a voice cut through the noise. Low, steady, familiar. "Funny," it said. "That's not what you told me last night." The room fell silent. Evelyn froze. Her gaze darted toward the entrance, and there he was. Liam Carter, her ex, her mistake, her first love. He stood there in a black suit, rain still glistening on his shoulders, a quiet defiance in his eyes. The crowd shifted, whispers spreading like fire. Daniel's smile stiffened. "What the hell is he doing here?" Daniel hissed under his breath. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came out. She hadn't seen Liam in 3 years, not since the night he walked away without a goodbye. And yet, in that moment, it was as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. Liam took a step forward, his gaze locked on her. "Congratulations, Evelyn," he said evenly. "I didn't get an invitation." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Security!" But before anyone could move, Liam added, "Before they drag me out, maybe you should tell them the truth about how this engagement really happened." Gasps. Cameras flashed. Evelyn's glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. For a split second, everything stopped, the music, the laughter, the illusion. And as she met Liam's eyes, Evelyn knew. This night would destroy everything she thought she wanted. The sound of shattering glass still echoed in Evelyn's ears long after the ballroom had gone silent. For a single dizzying second, everything blurred, the whispers, the flashes, the disbelief. Then, like a tide dragging her under, the past came rushing back. At 24, Evelyn Hart was a dreamer with ink-stained fingers and paint smudges on her sleeves. By day, she worked as an assistant in a small interior design studio downtown. By night, she painted sunsets, city lights, and fragments of emotions she couldn't quite put into words. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. She shared a tiny apartment with her best friend, Maya, and survived mostly on instant noodles and late-night laughter. She had no family left. Her father had passed when she was 16, and her mother had left long before that. But Evelyn never complained. She believed if she worked hard enough, one day she'd open her own studio. That dream felt real, until the day she met Liam Carter. It was raining the first time he walked into her world, literally. He burst into the studio, dripping wet, holding a broken architectural model in his hands. "Is this the design place?" he asked, breathless, water pooling at his feet. Evelyn blinked at him, caught between annoyance and curiosity. "You're ruining the floor." "Sorry," he said, flashing a grin that could melt steel. "I'll mop it myself if you help me fix this." He was charming, infuriating, and completely out of place. Later, she learned he was an architect from a rival firm, one of those people who seemed to have everything: money, connections, confidence. But what she didn't expect was how easy he was to talk to. He listened when she spoke. He asked about her art, her dreams, her father's old sketches. And when he looked at her, it wasn't pity or curiosity, it was warmth. Their friendship grew fast. Coffee runs turned into long walks into late dinners, and soon enough, he was leaving toothbrushes at her place and calling her sunshine. Evelyn had never been in love before, not like that. He made her feel seen, like she mattered in a world that had always told her she didn't. But love doesn't always bloom in fair soil. Liam came from privilege. His father owned Carter & Sons, one of the largest architecture firms in New York. Evelyn, meanwhile, was barely scraping by. At first, it didn't matter. He brushed off the differences. "You make me happier than any of them ever could," he'd say, pulling her close under the city lights. But the world they lived in had rules, and people who enforced them. When Daniel Pierce, a family friend and the CEO of the Pierce Development Group, began working with Carter & Sons, everything changed. Daniel was older, sophisticated, and came from the same circle as Liam's family. He saw potential in Liam's designs, and in his loyalty. One night, at a company gala, Evelyn watched from a corner as Liam was introduced to investors, shaking hands, smiling like he belonged. She was proud of him, until she heard Daniel's laugh and the words that followed. "She's sweet," Daniel said, nodding toward Evelyn. "But let's be honest, Liam, girls like her don't fit into this world." Liam hesitated for only a heartbeat before replying, "You're probably right." He didn't know Evelyn had heard. After that night, things began to shift. Liam grew busier, distracted. Meetings ran late. Calls went unanswered. When Evelyn asked, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "It's just work, sunshine. You know how it is." But deep down, she felt it. The growing distance, the way he flinched when she talked about her art, the polite smile when she mentioned moving in together. Maya noticed it first. "He's changing, Ev. Don't lose yourself trying to keep up." Evelyn shook her head. "He loves me. He's just under pressure. But love shouldn't feel like walking on glass." One evening, he showed up at her apartment with flowers. White lilies, her favorite. He looked exhausted but earnest. "I got the Carter project," he said, voice trembling with pride. "This could change everything." She hugged him, tears in her eyes. "I knew you would. I'll make it up to you," he promised. "When this is over, I'll take you somewhere no one knows us. Just you and me." For a moment, Evelyn believed him. Weeks later, she stopped by his office unannounced, just to surprise him with lunch. She remembered how her heart fluttered as she walked through the sleek glass doors, how proud she felt of him. But when the elevator opened to the top floor, the sound of laughter stopped her in her tracks. Through the glass wall of the conference room, she saw Liam and Daniel seated across from a group of investors. And beside Daniel sat a woman in a silver dress, Camille Pierce, Daniel's sister, beautiful, polished. The kind of woman who never had to chase dreams because they were handed to her. Evelyn watched as Camille leaned toward Liam, brushing something off his lapel. He didn't move away, then Daniel spoke. "Once the deal is official, we'll host a charity event. It'll be the perfect opportunity for you and Camille to appear together. The press will love it." Evelyn's breath caught. Camille and Liam. Together. Liam didn't argue. He didn't even blink. He just smiled faintly and said, "If that's what it takes to close the deal." Her heart shattered quietly in that sterile hallway, surrounded by glass and ambition. That night, she waited for him at her apartment. He came home late, smelling of rain and whiskey. "I saw you today," she said softly. He froze. "Evelyn, you didn't even deny it," she whispered. "You let them use you. You let him use you." "It's not what you think," he said. But his voice broke halfway through. "I'm doing this for us. For a future where I can give you everything you deserve." "I never asked for everything," she said. "Just honesty." He looked at her for a long time, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then he whispered, "I'll fix this." But the next morning he was gone. No note, no call, just silence and the ghost of a promise that never came true. 2 months later, Evelyn saw his name again. Liam Carter, lead architect for Pierce Development Group. And under that headline, the announcement: partnership sealed by upcoming engagement between Liam Carter and Camille Pierce. The words burned. But that wasn't the worst part. Because at the bottom of the article, in smaller print, was the name she'd learned to despise most, Daniel Pierce. CEO, the same man who would 2 years later stand beside her in that ballroom, her new fiancé. And in that moment, as the past collided with the present, Evelyn realized something chilling. The betrayal had started long before the night Liam showed up at her engagement party. It had been carefully built, piece by piece, by the same man now holding her hand in front of the world. The ballroom was no longer filled with music, only the sound of Evelyn's shattered glass echoing through the silence. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Cameras clicked, whispers rippled, and all she could hear was the furious pounding of her own heart. Daniel's arm slid off her waist. His expression, once polished and proud, hardened into something sharp. "What the hell is he talking about?" he hissed, his jaw tightening. Liam didn't flinch. His eyes never left Evelyn. "Tell them," he said quietly, voice steady. "Tell them how this engagement happened, Evelyn." The world spun. Evelyn tried to breathe, but the air felt like glass in her lungs. "Liam, stop," she whispered. He took a slow step forward. "I begged you not to get involved with him. I told you what Daniel does to people he can't own. And yet," his voice cracked, pain slicing through his words, "you let him turn you into one of them," the crowd gasped. Phones were raised, flashes exploded like lightning. Daniel's face darkened as security moved closer. "That's enough," Daniel snapped. "Get him out." 2 guards rushed forward, but Liam stood his ground, his voice rising over the chaos. "Do they know, Daniel, that this engagement was your little game? That you made sure she believed the only way to survive in this city was to marry her way up?" Daniel's mask slipped, just for a second. Then he smirked, smooth as ever. "You really should leave before you embarrass yourself further, Carter." But Evelyn wasn't listening anymore. Her ears rang, her chest ached, and her mind replayed his words. Game, survive, marry her way up. Was that what it was to them? A transaction? A performance dressed in diamonds and lies? The guards finally dragged Liam out, but the damage was done. The guests had begun to whisper. The reporters had already typed their headlines. And Daniel's reputation, the one he guarded so viciously, was suddenly, dangerously fragile. Evelyn stood frozen, unable to process the chaos around her. Her vision blurred as Daniel grabbed her arm, forcing a smile for the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice dangerously calm. "My fiancé is feeling unwell. The event is over. Please enjoy the evening. And remember, not everything you hear is true." As the guests slowly dispersed, he leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "We're going to talk, now." The door to his penthouse slammed shut behind them. Evelyn barely had time to speak before Daniel turned on her, voice like ice. "Do you have any idea what you've done tonight?" She stared at him, shaking. "What I've done?" "Daniel, you knew he would come. You knew—" "I knew nothing," he cut in sharply. "You think I'd let that lunatic ruin a deal worth millions?" Her heart pounded. "So this is about a deal." He laughed bitterly. "Don't act surprised. Everything in this world is about leverage, Evelyn, including you." Her stomach twisted. "Leverage? He stepped closer, eyes cold. You were a risk, and nobody I turned into something worth showing off. You think you'd be standing in that ballroom without me? Her voice broke. You used me? Daniel tilted his head, almost pitying. No, sweetheart. I created you. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Liam was right, she whispered. You destroy everything you can't control. Daniel's smirk faded. Careful, he said quietly. You forget who's holding your future in his hands. Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Then maybe I don't want that future anymore. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered through the glass windows, cold and distant. Then Daniel turned away, his tone calm again, calculated. You'll do as you're told. Tomorrow we release a statement. You'll say Liam was an unstable ex who's been harassing you for years. You'll look into the camera and cry if you have to. And if you don't... He met her gaze, unblinking. I'll make sure no one ever hires you again. Not in this city. Not anywhere. Her throat tightened. You're a monster. Daniel smiled faintly. No, I'm a businessman. That night, when he finally left to take a call, Evelyn locked herself in the bathroom. She stood before the mirror, makeup streaked, eyes hollow. The woman staring back at her wasn't the dreamer who painted sunsets in a tiny apartment. She was someone sculpted by men like Daniel, polished, obedient, lifeless. She pressed her palms against the cold marble sink. What have I become? She whispered. Her reflection didn't answer. A sudden vibration broke the silence, her phone buzzing on the counter. She picked it up with trembling hands. Unknown number. You shouldn't have stayed silent tonight. Her breath caught. Another message followed. Meet me tomorrow. Pier 17. 8 p.m. I'll show you what Daniel's been hiding. Liam. Her heart lurched. She should delete it, walk away, pretend she never saw it. But something inside her, something buried deep under months of lies and fear, flickered to life. Hope. Or maybe vengeance. The city felt heavier the next morning. Reporters camped outside Daniel's office. Gossip columns exploded with theories. And Evelyn's name was plastered across every headline. The fiancé and the ex, a love triangle in ruins. Pierce empire under fire after shocking party scene. Daniel's PR team worked like soldiers, spinning the story before it could destroy him. Evelyn, meanwhile, sat silently in his office as they rehearsed the statement she'd be forced to read. Say it exactly like this, the PR manager instructed, sliding a script across the table. Liam Carter has been unstable for years. I feared for my safety, and Daniel has been my only support. Evelyn stared at the paper, her hands trembling. Each word was a knife to her chest. When Daniel entered, everyone fell silent. He scanned her face, then the script. You'll read it at noon, he said simply. She nodded numbly, pretending to agree. Inside, something in her had already broken, and something else had begun to rise in its place. That evening, long after sunset, Evelyn stood at Pier 17, the wind whipping through her hair. The city lights shimmered on the water, blurred by mist. She almost didn't come, but when she saw Liam waiting at the end of the pier, shoulders tense, eyes shadowed, she knew she needed answers, even if they destroyed her. You shouldn't have texted me, she said quietly. I had to, he replied. You deserve to know the truth. Evelyn folded her arms, trying to steady herself. What truth? Liam pulled a folded document from his coat. Daniel didn't just use you, Evelyn. He bought you. Her eyes widened. What are you talking about? He handed her the paper. Contracts, transfers, your design studio? He bought it last year under a fake company name. The moment you signed that partnership deal, he owned every design, every sketch. You were never his fiancé. You were his investment. Her knees nearly gave out. She gripped the railing, staring at the papers, the words swimming before her eyes. No, she whispered. That can't be true. I wish it wasn't, Liam said softly. But I saw the files myself. He planned to announce a merger next week and use your name to make it look clean. That's why he needed you. You made him human. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. All this time, I thought I chose him, but he was just buying me. Liam stepped closer, his voice gentle now. You still have a choice, Evelyn. Walk away. Expose him before he buries you. For a moment, she wanted to believe him, to run, to be free again. But then a flash went off nearby. Cameras, voices. Evelyn Hart spotted with ex-lover Liam Carter. Panic flooded her chest. She turned. A group of photographers had followed her, their lenses flashing like gunfire. Liam's expression turned grim. "He set you up," he said. "He knew you'd come." She backed away, trembling. No, this can't." Then her phone buzzed. A notification. A breaking headline already spreading across every major outlet. Evelyn Hart, caught in secret meeting with ex, betrays fiancé hours after scandal. Her stomach twisted. Daniel's revenge had already begun. When she returned to the penthouse, Daniel was waiting, calm, collected, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. "Did you enjoy your little reunion?" he asked quietly. Her voice broke. "You followed me?" He smirked. "You're trending, Evelyn. You've made me quite the sympathetic victim." She froze. "You planned this?" "Of course I did." He poured himself a drink, ice clinking. "You think I'd let you ruin me twice in one day?" Tears welled in her eyes. "You destroyed me." Daniel looked at her over the rim of his glass, his tone chillingly smooth. "No, darling. I just reminded the world who you really are." She wanted to scream, to throw the glass, to tear everything apart. But she didn't. Instead, she stood perfectly still, every breath sharp and slow, because in that moment, Evelyn Hart finally understood. She had lost everything. Her love, her dream, her name. But somewhere deep beneath the wreckage, something fierce began to burn, and Daniel Pierce, for all his power, had no idea what he'd just awakened. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the penthouse, cold, sharp, merciless. Evelyn hadn't slept. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in last night's dress, staring at the headlines that had already consumed the internet. Evelyn Hart, the gold digger who played two men. Daniel Pierce's fiancée caught in secret affair with ex. Was it all just a PR stunt? Every article used the same photo, her standing on the pier, eyes red, hand trembling as she reached for Liam. Out of context, it looked intimate, damning, exactly how Daniel wanted. She scrolled past the comments, each one sharper than the last. Typical. Another wannabe social climber. Poor Daniel. She used him. She looks guilty. Look at her face. Her face. The one she'd spent years hiding behind foundation and forced smiles. Now it was the centerpiece of every scandal page in New York. The TV murmured in the background. Daniel's calm voice in a live interview. Perfectly composed. Perfectly rehearsed. "Evelyn's been under a lot of pressure," he said smoothly. "She's always been a kind soul, but unfortunately, Liam's obsession created a dangerous situation. I'm doing my best to protect her." The audience gasped sympathetically. The interviewer nodded, eyes soft. Daniel played the part of the betrayed fiancé flawlessly. Evelyn turned off the TV before she could throw something at it. Her phone buzzed. Another notification, this time from Daniel himself. "Daniel, get dressed. The charity gala tonight at the Astoria. We're going. You'll look calm, radiant, loyal. We'll fix the narrative." She typed and deleted a dozen replies before finally sending just one. "Evelyn, you already broke me. What's left to fix?" His answer came seconds later. "Daniel, your reputation, which, like everything else you own, still belongs to me." That night, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold-trimmed mirrors. The city's elite filled the space. Politicians, CEOs, fashion icons, all eager to witness the scandal in person. The orchestra played soft jazz, but every note carried tension. Evelyn stood at the top of the staircase, her gown a deep scarlet that clung to her frame like armor. Every step felt heavier than the last. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed her like a shadow. She's actually here. She has some nerve showing up. Poor Daniel, he deserves better. Her throat tightened, but she kept her chin high. The worst thing she could do was let them see her break. Daniel met her halfway down the stairs, immaculate in his black tuxedo. His smile was flawless, the kind that fooled the entire world. "You look beautiful," he murmured, taking her hand for the cameras. Her voice was ice. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They made their way through the crowd, all eyes on them. Every movement was a performance. His hand resting lightly on her back, his fake laughter, the way she nodded politely to the people who had already decided she was guilty. The speeches began an hour later. The event was for a children's foundation, irony at its cruelest. Daniel was one of the sponsors, and when he was invited to the stage, the crowd cheered as if nothing had happened. Evelyn stood near the front, surrounded by flashing cameras. Her glass of champagne trembled in her hand. Daniel's voice filled the room. Confident, charming, practiced. "Tonight, we celebrate hope, integrity, and the power of second chances," he said, pausing just long enough to let the words sting. "Because sometimes people make mistakes, and sometimes they find their way back." The audience applauded, completely oblivious to the blade hidden in his speech. Then, as the applause faded, he smiled at her from the stage, that same smile that once made her feel safe. Now, it felt like fire on her skin. "And speaking of second chances," Daniel continued smoothly, "I'd like to invite someone very special to join me. My fiancée, Evelyn Hart." The spotlight turned. For a split second, Evelyn froze. The crowd turned with it, expectant, curious, cruel. She forced herself forward, each step echoing against marble. When she reached the stage, Daniel handed her the microphone. His touch lingered, a reminder, a warning. "Say something, sweetheart," he said softly, but his eyes were steel. Evelyn's mouth went dry. The crowd stared. The lights burned. She took a breath, her voice barely steady. "Thank you for your kindness." Forgive me?" Daniel interrupted gently, tilting his head toward her. Her breath caught. "What?" He smiled for the audience. "That's what you were going to say, wasn't it? That you forgive me for losing my temper, for being protective. Isn't that right?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, polite, confused. Cameras clicked. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Daniel, stop. But he didn't. He turned to the audience, playing the role of the wounded man bearing his heart. "We all make mistakes. I let jealousy cloud my judgment when I saw her with her ex. But I know Evelyn. She'd never betray me." He looked at her again, his voice low. "Right, darling?" It wasn't a question. It was a command. Something inside her cracked. Her hands shook, her heart pounded, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to disappear. She wanted to scream, to run, to tear off the mask that was suffocating her. But she couldn't move. The crowd waited. Her silence became its own verdict. And then, Daniel laughed softly, his arm curling around her waist. "She's shy," he said, his tone warm, rehearsed. "But actions speak louder than words, don't they?" He leaned in and kissed her cheek, a mockery of affection, staged for the world to see. The room erupted in applause, but Evelyn didn't hear it. Her mind had gone silent, her chest hollow. Every smile, every flash of light felt like glass cutting through her. For a moment, she thought she might faint. Then she saw movement at the edge of the crowd, a familiar figure, half in shadow. Liam. He was watching her, his face unreadable, but his eyes burned with fury. Minutes later, Daniel excused himself to speak to reporters, leaving her alone on stage. Evelyn tried to step down, but the photographers swarmed her, shouting questions. "Evelyn! Were you and Liam still together? Did Daniel pay you to stay? Are you still engaged?" Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. Someone's hand brushed her arm. Another grabbed at her dress. Cameras flashed inches from her face. Then a glass shattered. Someone laughed, and she realized they weren't just photographing her anymore. They were mocking her. She looks terrified. "Smile for us, Evelyn. Come on, give us one of those gold digger poses." A sharp pain hit her chest. The walls seemed to close in. Suddenly, The sound of a deep voice cut through the chaos. That's enough. It was calm, steady, but carried the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. The crowd turned. A man stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, his tuxedo perfectly tailored but his expression dark with anger. He reached her side in 3 strides, his hand gentle but firm as he guided her down the steps. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. His voice was low, grounded, the kind that made everything else fade. Evelyn blinked, barely processing his face. She didn't know him, and yet somehow she felt safe. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He slipped his jacket off and draped it over her bare shoulders before turning toward the stunned reporters. "Anyone who publishes another lie about her," he said, voice sharp as ice, "will hear from me personally." The tone wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The crowd hesitated, murmuring. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled, and the man caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured. "Let's get you out of here." He led her through the back exit, away from the noise, away from Daniel, away from everything. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a wave. She inhaled shakily, clutching his jacket tighter around herself. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. The man studied her for a moment, his gaze steady, compassionate, but sharp enough to see through the cracks she tried to hide. "Because I know what it's like to be trapped in someone else's story," he said. She frowned slightly. "I don't even know your name." He gave a faint, almost tired smile. "You will." He stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers, voice low and certain. "I know who he really is, and I'm going to help you take everything back." Rain streaked across the windshield as Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, her trembling hands gripping the stranger's jacket around her shoulders. The city blurred past, lights, horns, chaos, but inside the car it was silent. She hadn't even asked where they were going. Maybe she didn't care. After the humiliation at the Astoria, after Daniel's cruelty, the world had already seen her break. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was calm, measured. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not with him." Evelyn turned to him, studying his face in the dim light. Sharp jawline, dark hair, eyes that carried both warmth and something colder, calculating. "Then who are you?" He hesitated, then said, "Someone who's been watching Daniel Pierce for a long time. Name's Adrian Cole." She frowned. "Watching him? Why?" "Because men like Daniel don't just ruin reputations," he said quietly. "They destroy lives, and businesses, when it benefits them." The way he said it sent a chill down her spine. He brought her to a quiet townhouse on the edge of Brooklyn. The place looked plain from the outside, but inside it was a minimalist fortress. No photos, no personal touches, just quiet order. Adrian handed her a towel and some clothes. "Rest, then we talk." Hours later, Evelyn sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. She looked smaller than she had in that ballroom. The strength that held her together now replaced by exhaustion. Adrian placed a steaming mug of coffee in her hands and sat across from her. "You should know," he began. "Everything that's happening, the articles, the leaks, the photos, it was planned." "Weeks ago," Evelyn's head snapped up. "What?" He nodded. "Daniel didn't lose control. He orchestrated your humiliation. He wanted you isolated, vulnerable." She stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. Why would he do that? What could he possibly gain from... Adrian interrupted softly. "From making you look unfaithful? From making you untrustworthy? The answer is simple. Money." Adrian walked to a small desk and opened a folder filled with documents, photographs, and financial reports. "Your father, Charles Hart, once owned 28% of Pierce Development Group." Evelyn blinked. "That's impossible. My father was an architect. He was more than that," Adrian said, handing her a photo. An old one, her father standing beside Daniel's late father, both smiling in front of a construction site. "They started the company together. But when your father died, his shares should have passed to you." Her voice trembled. "Should have?" Adrian nodded grimly. Daniel's family produced a falsified will, claimed your father sold his stake before his death, but the signatures were forged. You were too young to contest it, and they buried the evidence. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her fingers gripped the papers like they might burn her. So, all this time he's been using you, Adrian finished. Getting close to you wasn't about love. It was about control. The moment you became his fiancée, your silence was guaranteed. He didn't need to worry you'd find out what he stole. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. He proposed to protect himself. Adrian's eyes softened. He didn't expect Liam to come back. That's what ruined his perfect little scheme. The pieces began to fall together in Evelyn's mind. The timing, the manipulation, the charm that always felt too polished. Her heartbreak twisted into something sharper, colder. Liam was just a convenient scapegoat, Adrian continued. Daniel leaked that story to the press himself. The photos, the interviews, the fake outrage, it was all to make you look unstable. He planned to call off the engagement next month, citing personal differences, and frame you as the unfaithful fiancé. Her voice broke. And the shares? He would have used the scandal to claim you were unfit to inherit. It's cleaner that way. No one questions a man who's forgiving his broken-hearted ex. Evelyn stood abruptly, her pulse pounding. That monster! For a long moment, only the rain filled the silence. Then Evelyn asked, Why are you helping me, Adrian? What do you want out of this? He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. Because I used to work for him, he said finally. I was head of security at Pierce Development. I thought I was protecting an empire built on ambition. I didn't know I was protecting a criminal. Her gaze sharpened. What did he do? Adrian exhaled slowly. 2 years ago, there was a construction accident on a project in Queens. 3 workers died. Daniel covered it up, bribed inspectors, falsified reports. I found the documents, confronted him, and 2 days later, my entire career was destroyed. I lost everything. Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper. He ruined you too, he nodded. And your father, and who knows how many others. She sank back down, her mind spinning. So you've been collecting evidence? For 2 years, he confirmed. Financial fraud, bribery, blackmail, falsified contracts, and now, defamation. But without your testimony, it's not enough. We need someone on the inside, Evelyn. Looked at him. The man who had just saved her from the worst. Night of her life. And saw the same resolve, burning in his eyes that was starting to flicker in, hers, for the first time in weeks. Evelyn felt something she hadn't dared to feel since Daniel's betrayal. Purpose. She straightened her shoulders. If what you're saying is true, then I want to see everything. Every file, every document. I want to know exactly how he did it. Adrian nodded approvingly and handed her a laptop. Then we start now. Hours passed in silence as Evelyn read through reports. Fake invoices, bank transfers, offshore accounts. Each click revealed another layer of deception, another reason to hate him. When she reached the final folder, her hands froze. It was labeled simply, Project H, Confidential. Inside were scanned letters, her father's handwriting, words she hadn't seen since she was 16. Daniel, this isn't what we agreed. You can't take this project without including my name. My daughter deserves her share of what we built. Her eyes filled with tears. He threatened my father. That's why he signed. Adrian's expression darkened. And when your father refused to stay quiet, the accident that took his life, it wasn't an accident. Evelyn's heart stopped. What do you mean? Adrian met her gaze. There was no mechanical failure, no malfunction. The report was doctored. Daniel's father ordered the cover-up, and Daniel learned from him exactly how to bury people who get in the way. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. Evelyn's tears turned to something else, fury, sharp and consuming. She stood slowly, every ounce of exhaustion burning away. Then I'll make him pay. For my father, for every lie, for everything he stole. Adrian's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. That's the spirit. Evelyn looked at him, her voice steady now. You said we need someone on the inside. Fine, I'll go back. Adrian frowned. That's dangerous. So is trusting the wrong man, she said bitterly. But I've done that before. I won't make the same mistake twice. She took a breath, her tone firm. Daniel thinks he's won. Let's make him believe it, until the moment he falls. Adrian studied her. The quiet girl he'd rescued from the storm, now standing like steel reborn in fire. If you do this, there's no turning back. She met his gaze without hesitation. I don't want to turn back. I want the truth, and I want justice. Before dawn, Evelyn stood by the window, watching the first traces of sunlight crawl across the skyline. The city looked different now, no longer a place of dreams but a battlefield. Adrian approached quietly. You don't have to face him alone. I won't, she said. Because this time, I'll be the one holding the power. He nodded slowly, then handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photo. Daniel and a group of executives at a private meeting, shaking hands with a man Evelyn didn't recognize. Who's that? She asked. Adrian's eyes hardened. The real puppet master, Victor Lang. He funds Daniel's projects, and he's behind the forged will that took your father's shares. Evelyn stared at the picture, memorizing every detail. Then he's next. Adrian smiled faintly, admiration flickering in his gaze. You sound like someone who's ready to fight. She turned from the window, her expression calm, resolute. No, she said. I sound like someone who's finally awake. That night, as the city lights flickered below, Evelyn opened her laptop and began typing an email to Daniel, her voice honey-sweet, her tone apologetic. Daniel, I want to make things right. Meet me tomorrow, just you and me. When she hit send, her reflection stared back at her, eyes no longer broken, but burning with purpose. The world had taken everything from her. Now it was her turn. This time, she whispered, I'll be the one writing the story. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. For months, Clara had buried herself in silence, nursing the bruises life had left on her soul. But now that silence was her weapon. Every step she took was measured, deliberate, fueled by the memory of her uncle's smirk and Nathan's betrayal. She wasn't the same woman who had been humiliated under flashing lights. That version of her had died the night her truth was stolen. The Clara that remained was sharper, colder, and more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Ethan, her unlikely ally, watched from across the table as she laid out files, documents and bank statements like pieces of a chess game. They all thought I was done, Clara said quietly, flipping through evidence. But this time, I'll let them destroy themselves. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. You're about to go up against some powerful people, Clara. Are you sure you're ready? Her eyes hardened. I've been ready since the night they took everything from me. Together, they had uncovered enough proof to expose Leonard's crimes, embezzlement, fraud, and the forged will that had stolen her father's company. Clara's uncle hadn't just betrayed family. He'd built an empire of lies. The plan was simple, but deadly. Step 1, file the lawsuit. Step 2, bring everything to light in front of the board and the public. Step 3, make sure Leonard never had a place to hide again. But Clara knew revenge came at a cost, and she was ready to pay every cent of it. The board meeting was held at the company's grand conference hall, the same place her father once stood to give speeches filled with pride and integrity. Now the air reeked of deceit. Leonard sat at the head of the table, confident and smug, with Nathan beside him like a loyal shadow. Ah, my dear niece, Leonard greeted with that sickly sweet tone that made Clara's stomach twist. It's been a while. You look determined. I am, Clara replied, setting a folder down in front of him. You might want to read that before your coffee gets cold. He opened it lazily, scanning the papers. But his smirk faltered as the words registered. Bank transfers, fake signatures, secret accounts. Ethan had done his job well. What is this? Leonard barked, voice rising. The truth, Clara said, her tone steady. The truth you buried with my father. The room fell silent. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan's expression turned pale, his jaw tightening. You think you can accuse me of fraud? Leonard sneered. This company exists because of me. No, Clara shot back. It exists because of him, my father. You stole it from him and from me, but not anymore." Her words cut through the tension like glass. She could almost feel her father's presence beside her, watching. The next hours were chaos. News of the lawsuit hit the press like wildfire. Reporters flooded the building. Cameras captured every second of Leonard's downfall. The man once praised as a visionary now being escorted out by security. Nathan tried to stay quiet, to slip away unnoticed. But Clara stopped him in the hallway, where years of love and betrayal collided. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice trembling. "Leonard promised. He said it was for the good of the company." Clara stared at him, her heart a battlefield of anger and heartbreak. "You stood beside the man who ruined my life and called it loyalty." He reached for her hand, desperate. "Clara, She stepped back. "You taught me something, Nathan. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it wears the face of the person you love the most." He froze, guilt tearing through him as she walked away. Weeks later, the courtroom was packed. The trial had drawn attention from the media, investors, and the public. Clara sat with Ethan, her expression calm, her hands steady. She'd spent so long trembling in fear. Now she only felt clarity. The defense tried to twist the narrative, painting her as a bitter heiress chasing revenge. But when Clara took the stand, her testimony silenced the room. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," she said clearly. "I'm here because justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who I am, and making sure no one else gets hurt the way I did." Her voice carried across the room like a blade of truth. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. Leonard was guilty. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. Clara reclaimed her father's company, not as a victim, but as its rightful heir. When the gavel struck, Clara exhaled for the first time in years. Reporters rushed forward, shouting her name, but she didn't stop for interviews. She walked outside into the sunlight, where Ethan was waiting by the steps. "It's over," he said softly. "No," she replied, looking up at the sky. "It's just beginning." He smiled faintly. "So what now?" Clara's eyes held a quiet fire. "Now I rebuild. But this time I do it my way." The wind caught her hair as she walked forward, leaving behind the courthouse and the ghosts of her past. Later that night, she stood on her apartment balcony, the city lights flickering below. Ethan joined her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To justice?" he offered. Clara smirked. "To redemption." They clinked glasses, the sound crisp against the silence. For the first time in years, she felt peace. She had faced her demons and watched them fall. Karma wasn't a myth. It was simply truth, delayed but inevitable. And as the night stretched across the city, Clara knew one thing for certain. She wasn't done writing her story. She was only just getting started. The courtroom doors had closed behind Leonard, leaving behind only the echoes of justice served. Clara stood alone for a moment, letting the weight of months lift from her shoulders. Victory had a strange taste. Not sweet, not bitter, but clear. Like the first sip of water after days in the desert. It was during this quiet aftermath that Nathan appeared. He didn't storm in, didn't shout or demand attention. He simply stood at the entrance, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, as if the very air weighed him down. Clara's heart stirred, though she kept her expression calm, measured. She had built herself from pain and betrayal, and she would not crumble now. Nathan began, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. About everything. I let him manipulate me, let him twist the truth, and I hurt you. Clara raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. She didn't need words to understand the turmoil etched on his face. She had seen it all before. The fear, the regret, the quiet desperation of a man who finally realized the cost of his choices. "Nathan," she said softly, her tone carrying both distance and understanding. "I don't need excuses. I need actions. Redemption isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. He swallowed hard, nodding, tears welling in his eyes. Please. I want to make things right. With you. With everyone I've wronged. Clara looked past him for a moment, her gaze on the skyline through the courtroom windows. The city seemed to shine differently now, reflecting her clarity. Redemption is possible, she said finally. But it doesn't mean we forget. It means we learn. It means we become better than the mistakes we've made. Nathan's shoulders relaxed slightly, hope mingling with remorse. I'll do whatever it takes, he whispered. She nodded once, firmly. Then start there. Be honest. Be accountable. And maybe, one day, you can be trusted again. Over the next few months, Clara focused on more than just her company. She reached out to those she had grown distant from, the sister she had argued with over family tensions, her friends who had doubted her, and colleagues who had feared speaking up against Leonard. Slowly, bridges were rebuilt. Conversations that once carried bitterness were now gentle, tinged with understanding and forgiveness. Her father's memory guided her. She established the Hart Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs who had been victims of deceit or unfair practices. She channeled her pain into purpose, turning what had once been a source of anger into a beacon of hope for others. Nathan worked quietly alongside her, taking responsibility for his actions, supporting her initiatives without seeking attention. Their interactions were careful, respectful, and genuine, a stark contrast to the past. Clara didn't seek revenge. She had realized that true power came from restraint, from choosing growth over hatred. Even the family dynamics slowly mended. Family dinners became spaces of laughter instead of tension. Conversations with her sister transformed into moments of sharing dreams and plans for the future, not grievances about the past. Each reunion was a reminder that the heart could heal, if given the chance. Clara spent mornings walking along the city park paths, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the humiliation, the betrayals, and the nights she had cried herself to sleep. And she recognized the resilience she had cultivated, the strength that had grown from every scar. She thought of Ethan, who had stood beside her, unwavering, patient, and understanding. He had never asked her to rush her healing. He had let her grow, letting trust and affection build naturally. Their bond deepened, not through urgency or drama, but through shared respect, laughter, and quiet moments of connection. One crisp autumn evening, Nathan approached her at the Hart Foundation's new office opening. He was composed, steady, carrying a small notebook filled with reports on the Foundation's outreach programs, proof that he had acted, that he had changed. Clara studied him, her eyes softening. "You've done well," she said, nodding. "I see your efforts, Nathan. I see that you're trying to make amends." He smiled faintly, a mix of relief and humility. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "And yet," she replied, "it is enough that you understand the weight of your choices. Change is better than restitution. Forgiveness is earned, but peace is what we give ourselves." They stood together, silent for a moment, recognizing that the past no longer controlled them. Clara's gaze shifted to the city below, the lights, the people, the endless possibilities. She felt a profound sense of balance, a quiet triumph that came not from vengeance, but from reclaiming her life fully. That night, as she closed her office door, Clara whispered to herself, "I am stronger. I am free. And I choose my happiness." Her steps were lighter, her heart steadier. She had survived betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and had emerged not only victorious, but whole. The stage was set for new beginnings, bridges rebuilt, love nurtured quietly, and a future no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past. Clara had reclaimed her power, not through fury, but through forgiveness, growth, and unwavering self-respect. Her story, once defined by betrayal and loss, was now defined by resilience, hope, and the promise of tomorrow. The months after the trial felt like learning to breathe again. Clara had won, not just the company or her father's legacy, but herself. The bitterness that once weighed on her chest was replaced with quiet strength. Her days were filled with rebuilding what had been broken, not just in business but in her heart. Still, sometimes, when the city fell silent at night, she thought of Ethan, the man who had stood beside her through the storm, who had given her truth when the world gave her lies. They hadn't spoken much since the verdict. Maybe it was easier that way. Maybe both of them needed space to heal. It was a spring evening when Ethan showed up at her office unannounced. The last golden rays of sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, painting the room in shades of gold and rose. He stood there, holding a single white lily. Simple, elegant, sincere. "You shouldn't have come," Clara said softly, though her voice trembled. "I know," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "But I needed to see you, before I couldn't anymore." Her heart thudded painfully. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, his eyes carrying that same quiet sadness she'd learned to read too well. "I got an offer. A position overseas. It's something I've wanted for years. I thought maybe I'd take it." Clara turned away, pretending to organize the files on her desk. "That's good. You deserve that chance." He hesitated before saying, "Clara, that's not why I came." She froze. "I came because—" He drew in a breath. "I love you. Not because of what you've been through, not because I pity you, but because you're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known." The words hung in the air, soft but sharp. Clara's hand shook slightly, her composure breaking for the first time in months. "Ethan," she whispered, "I can't." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I've spent so much of my life depending on someone. My father, then Nathan. I need to stand on my own now. I need to know who I am before I can love anyone again." He nodded slowly, pain flickering in his eyes. But there was also respect. "Then I'll wait," he said quietly, "even if it takes a lifetime." He left the lily on her desk, bowed his head once, and walked out into the fading light. Time passed like a gentle tide. Under Clara's leadership, the company flourished again, honest, strong, transparent. She launched a foundation in her father's name to help young entrepreneurs who had lost everything to greed. It was her way of turning pain into purpose. But even as success returned, her heart remained tender. Sometimes she would see something, a man laughing at a cafe, the scent of coffee and lilies, and think of Ethan. One afternoon, while speaking at a charity event, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing near the back of the hall, tall, calm, quietly confident. Her breath caught Ethan. He looked different, slightly tanned, sharper, but his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. When the event ended, he approached her. "Still saving the world, I see," he said gently. Clara laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. Someone has to try. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them thick with memories. "Are you back for good?" she finally asked. He nodded. "I realized something while I was away. You don't need someone to complete you, Clara. You just need someone who will stand beside you while you build your world." Her heart fluttered, but she stayed quiet, afraid to break the moment. A year later, on a crisp autumn morning, Clara returned to the same hill where she used to go with her father, a quiet place overlooking the city skyline. She was surprised to find Ethan waiting there, a small box in his hand. "I figured if I was going to do this," he said with a nervous chuckle, "I should do it where it all began." Clara blinked, the wind teasing her hair. "Ethan." He stepped closer, eyes full of calm certainty. "I know you don't need saving. You never did, but I'd like to be the one who walks beside you anyway. Through everything." He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond ring. It was a delicate silver band with a single white lily engraved on it. Her breath hitched. "The lily? The same flower from the day I told you goodbye," he said softly. A reminder, not of the pain, but of how far you've come. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. You always did know how to turn my scars into something beautiful. He knelt, voice steady. Clara Matthews, will you let me share your future? For a moment, the world stood still. Then she nodded, whispering, yes. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, and she felt the weight of the past finally lift away. As the city glowed below them, he pulled her close, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I told you, he murmured. I'd wait. And under the golden light of the setting sun, Clara realized something she never thought she'd feel again. Peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that blooms from surviving. She had lost everything once. But this time she wasn't starting over. She was starting free. The sun had fully risen over the city, casting warm light on Clara's office as she looked out over the skyline. The whirlwind of betrayal, humiliation, and revenge had passed, leaving only clarity in its wake. She thought of the long nights, the tears, the moments when giving up seemed easier than moving forward. But she had risen. She had fought. And in doing so, she had discovered something more valuable than victory: herself. Clara's journey reminded everyone watching that betrayal does not define who you are. It is not the lies of others, nor the cruelty of those we once trusted, that shapes our future. Instead, it is how we stand, how we reclaim our life, and how we refuse to surrender to the darkness that tries to consume us. She had learned that true strength was not in retaliation alone, but in choosing justice with integrity. In facing those who wronged her, she did not allow anger to blind her. She channeled it, transformed it into resolve, and created a path forward that honored her values. And through it all, she realized that love and trust could bloom again, not despite pain, but because of it. Ethan had been a part of that journey, yes, but even more so, he had been a witness to her courage. Together they had found that healing and love are not gifts given. They are built, piece by piece, through patience, respect, and the willingness to fight for a better tomorrow. As Clara turned from the window, her eyes lingered on the photo of her father on the desk, a man who had taught her ambition, compassion, and the importance of standing tall. She smiled softly, knowing that she carried his legacy in every decision, every step forward, every act of kindness, and every moment of bravery. To all who hear this story, betrayal may leave scars, humiliation may leave memories, but the power to rise, to reclaim your life, and to embrace justice is in your hands. Never let someone else's darkness define your light. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts on justice, karma, and love that conquers hardship. Like the video if you believe in second chances and personal strength, and subscribe for more stories where hearts are tested, villains are unmasked, and the triumph of truth and love shines through. Remember, the world may try to break you, but it is how you rise that writes your story.